Hello and good day, and welcome to the Ardent Partners monthly webinar series. Today, AI Decoded, what every CPO needs to know. In 2024, AI is seemingly everywhere, everything, all at once, and it has dominated business and technology discussions, particularly since the launch of ChatGPT. The opportunities are immense, but the amount of information on AI is overwhelming. Today, we're going to help you cut through the noise by answering the important questions, right? What are the best opportunities today for procurement, and how do we access them? Where should we focus procurement resources today? How do we develop organizational AI expertise, and what's ahead? Now, we've got a chock-filled presentation for you here, but first, a little housekeeping. Everybody attending today will receive a copy of the slides in an email from Ardent Partners tomorrow. Our sponsor, Arkestro, will make the link of this recording available to all registrants as well. We will be trying to save some time at the end for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please enter them into the chat menu. And we're just going to dive in, right? So the agenda pretty straightforward. Real brief on Ardent Partners, right? So Ardent Partners now in their 15th year. We're a next generation analyst firm that does a broad range of research. We do market research, we do technology research. We have captured a lot of data. We focus on the source to pay or the source to settle process, right? So working in procurement, working in finance, that's the primary focus. Encourage you to visit ardentpartners.com for more information and more details. I mentioned that today's webinar is part of our monthly webinar series, something that we've been hosting for, I guess now technically our 11th year. Coming up, right? We're in the big season, right? We've got some very exciting webinars coming up, looking at compliance. We have the research findings from our 19th annual State of Procurement report coming up at the end of next month, and then procurement metrics that matter in June. So information, you can register for those webinars today. So go to the link there, and hope to see you at the next one as well. Today's speakers were very lucky today, right? So we're going to have a great interactive dialogue, three long-standing professionals in the space, right? So I'm Andrew Bartolini. I'm the founder, chief research officer at Ardent Partners, leading the charge here for 15 years and another decade prior of work. I'm very pleased to pull Magnus in. He's finally in the same time zone as I am. Magnus Bergfors is our VP of Research, really driving the charge on the procurement technology research, long-standing career working at solution providers, working at other industry analyst firms, including Gartner for, what was it, close to a decade, Magnus?
Yeah, close to 8 years at least, yeah.
8 years there, and so very lucky to have him. Has been focused on procurement for the bulk of his career. And then last but not least, I've got Neil Lustig, who I worked with. Didn't interact too much with you, Neil. You're an executive at Ariba back in the day, really overseeing all of North America and for a time I think also Europe. You are of course Arkestro's CEO. You've got over 30 years of experience leading and building teams in technology. You've been CEOs at a couple other places, including GAN Integrity and Sailthrough. Vendavo as well, and now at Arkestro, a very interesting company at a very interesting point in time as it relates to today's presentation. So Neil, Magnus, welcome. Neil, great to have you here. I've just given a little intro on yourself. Maybe take a few minutes and tell us about today's sponsor and your company, Arkestro.
Great, I'd love to. So just to keep it short, Arkestro is a company that's trying to transform procurement, and we use a few different levers in this process. We really wanted to step back and rethink the process of making decisions in procurement, and then see how we'd apply a number of disciplines across the board to really up the game and improve the ability of procurement to make decisions. This is data science, human science, behavioral science and game theory, dynamic supplier feedback, pricing theory, and then automation. And all these ingredients coming together into what we call predictive procurement orchestration. And if you advance the slide one more, You know, our themes are really simple around helping our customers reduce time, reduce cost, reduce risk. And we do this through a couple of different ways and processes. First, just making sure we can help our customers manage as much spend as possible, recommend which spend to address. We understand that the most precious resource for most of our customers is time, and just where to spend that time, which areas of spend, which problems to solve, how to improve outcomes when you decide to dig in, how to make sure you have a robust supplier base, and then everything in procurement is a part of a holistic technology stack. And so obviously integrations and APIs, a big part of where we focus our attention. So that's Arkestro in a nutshell, and I'll turn it back to you, Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Right. So, the biggest, the best resource, right, is time and resources and staffing. And what we want to do today is sort of streamline the discussion around AI and procurement, right? Because beyond the hype, and there's been plenty of hype within the procurement realm, within, again, AI has dominated the discourse in business and technology. Anything online, seems to now have an AI spin to it. But within procurement, right, AI really does have the potential to channel an entirely new level of innovation. Right, over the next few years, rather, this technology is going to start to enable procurement professionals and their teams to transform many of the tactical and strategic activities of the function, while also tapping into an underutilized repository of procurement information, data, and insights to drive deeper procurement intelligence, right? So we've been talking about procurement intelligence for a long time, and what does it mean to have an intelligent procurement operation? AI is really going to be the catalyst that gets the industry, that gets the profession to the next level, really becoming a truly data-driven organization. So we wanted to, so it's AI decoded, but we wanted to do AI defined, right? And so there's different variations of AI and what it does, right? It's a branch of computer science. It's an approach to managing data. When you sort of boil it down, right, I think, it's less about the definition of AI and more about the capabilities and what it can do, right? It's computer systems that can manage and process and learn and aggregate large, enormous amounts of data, and then mimic, augment, and in many ways surpass human intelligence, right, in performing a wide range of cognitive tasks, right? I think, where we're going to start, and I'm going to pull Magnus in here in a second, is we're not starting with, AI designing, an entire sourcing event and coming back with signed contracts and starting to issue POs today, right? It's going to start around the edges of these processes to add real value, and slowly but surely begin to take a larger sort of control over procurement operations. And by control, I mean sort of impact, because humans will still be driving the bus. And so when we think about AI, right, I really do think about it in the context of the transformational technologies of our lifetime, right? Starting with the desktop and mainframe, right, and then moving into Windows. Obviously the internet is transformed, right? So people who grew up without the internet, like myself, and our kids who are growing up with the internet, it's an entirely different experience. I think the same thing can be said for cloud and mobile. And these are impacts that have impacted our home life, have certainly impacted our business life. In many ways, they have enabled the global supply chains that, we're now managing and rethinking today, right? We've spent a lot of time at Ardent Partners talking about how these global supply chains have expanded, right? Wouldn't be possible, and certainly wouldn't be as efficient and effective and as broad-based without the technology. And then, we come to AI. And so within each of these areas, right, there have been sort of a dramatic transformation and really a move to an entirely different level of performance and engagement and an analysis and really prevalent. And so there have been, other technologies that have tried to enter the conversation, been hyped for a little bit, hyped for a little while. I mean, blockchain comes to mind, but AI, in the bigger picture and over the long term, really is going to be pervasive within enterprise technology, within a procurement operation. And that's what we really want to talk about today. And so, Magnus, I'm going to pull you in and talk about the levels of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew sort of mentioned, there's a lot of different definitions and ideas around artificial intelligence. And if we leave sort of the more conceptual discussions aside and focus on the technologies, there's still a number of different sort of classifications of this and that technology within artificial intelligence. But I think everybody would agree that especially machine learning is very, very central to artificial intelligence, and I would argue it underpins most of the other sort of artificial intelligence technology groups, if you will. So machine learning then is a form of statistical algorithms that learn and can generalize problems, so it can perform specific tasks without being explicit, getting explicit instructions. And as a subset of machine learning, we have something called deep learning, which is then a more complex or more advanced form of machine learning, where you have what's called neural layers and neural networks with multiple layers that can address even more complex problem than machine learning. So if you think of things like parsing language and identifying pictures and so on, you typically need deep learning. And then as a subset of deep learning, you have what's been typically most hyped here lately around generative AI, which is then basically the capability of these AI machines to create new content based on training data and natural language processing capabilities. So I have this sort of Venn diagram here to overlap. And as I said before, machine learning is sort of fundamental to many of the other artificial intelligence technologies, and natural language processing being one of them, that is the discipline of understanding sentiment and nuance and what we infer the meaning of what we're trying to say. So there's like semantic rules and things like that being built in, but then also using machine learning, deep learning, and Gen AI to really be able to understand and to create natural language. So just using that as a background for what we're talking about here today, that these are the areas that are probably most applicable for procurement.
Right. So different model types here, Neil. How do you do you think about AI this way, or do you come at it from a different perspective?
No, I think this is a good way to look at it, but as I think about the procurement tech stack of the future, right? The reality is you're going to solve problems with a set of models. So there are going to be some things that some problems that you solve that are going to use generative AI. Others are going to just use a more simplistic natural language processing. The future procurement tech stack is going to have dozens of different models that work together based on the type of problem, based on the type of data that you have. I think it's important to understand them conceptually, but then on a day-to-day basis, you're going to be passing data back and forth between models. All this is going to be, to some extent, below the waterline of the iceberg of a procurement tech stack. You won't see it that much. You'll just see the interactions. But it's good to know these are the elements that go into the tech stack of the future for procurement.
Yeah, right. So I agree, right? So I mean, no matter how you define it, no matter which model is actually being applied, I think the key thing is to understand the capabilities and the results. And again, early stage, so we wanted to set a little bit of a foundation. But again, AI, is early in its maturity, Magnus, right? So there are things it can do and things that it can't do yet.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think we need to be sort of aware of where does AI play a bigger role, and where do we still need sort of humans involved in the process. And obviously AI is very suitable to automate manual repetitive tasks, for example. It's really good at identifying patterns and anomalies in large data sets, which is something that is quite taxing for humans, or in some cases impossible for humans. And also, as mentioned before, sort of the statistical prediction. So based on what data we have and what does that say, what do we think is going to happen in the future or in the near future? And then lastly here now with the introduction of generative AI and LLMs and all of this stuff, the ability to actually create good content and analyze content or statements and natural language, and then be able to create content based on that. But the limitations, though, are quite substantial still, I would say, even though there's really a lot of progress here. So one area of a limitation here is that the sort of the common sense that we as humans have naturally. One example of this is for a long time that generative AI models had a weird infliction or weird habit of painting or creating pictures of humans with like 6 or 7 fingers. So as a human, we realize that that's, by common sense, we know people have 5 fingers, but if the AI model isn't explicitly taught that, then it doesn't necessarily know. So it lacks that sort of common sense. Emotional cultural sensitivity is also difficult for AI, right? To pick up on emotions. What do I mean? What my sort of inflection and choice of words actually mean from an emotional perspective, and also the sort of the cultural sensitivity where what language could be offensive and so on. Also, AI struggles with implications. You have to be very specific, and this sort of comes out in some of the discussions that have been recently around prompt engineering and so on. So you have to be specific in instructions and training and so on, because the computer cannot sort of guess what you're meaning. It needs clear instructions. AI also is typically a sort of a black box, right? So it arrives at a result or a discussion, but it doesn't necessarily, or it can't really explain how it got there, depending on what type of models you're using, of course. If it's very simple, then it can probably explain the steps that it took. But if we get into neural networks and so on, it really cannot sort of explain exactly why it arrived at a result. And then, of course, probably something that has been very public discussions around is the hallucinations of LLMs. So LLM is then part of generative AI that deals with text, and if you don't specifically instruct the LLM to say that it doesn't know, if it doesn't know, then it will come up with an answer, because it's a word prediction engine in a sense. So it won't really, it doesn't really care about the truth. It just sort of comes up with a statistically valid text and sentence and words, so to speak.
Yeah, right. So I mean, when I think about AI, I think about the power of, sort of, the ability to process large, massive size of data, and to come out with an analysis and guided recommendations on something that is beyond sort of human capabilities. And then on the same time, right, unless it's trained, the systems don't have the understanding that there may be 2 documents that are part of the same transaction, and they may not be able to drive any type of understand real life scenarios. Neil, I mean, you guys are sort of at the forefront of this. How do you lay this out?
Yeah, I think this is a great slide and perspective. You nailed the strength. Processing large amounts of data, doing this pattern matching, statistical predictions. This is great. Again, it's one of the interesting things. Humans can look at data and can find matches, one by one. It's a laborious task. Computers are very good, and particularly AI is great at consuming vast amounts of data. For example, we're piloting now, pulling in hundreds of commodity indices measured against millions of transactions to try to find anomalies and patterns in movements of commodities and movements of prices. And could you do this manually? Maybe if you had an army of people in years, but AI does this very quickly and easily, and so it works quite well. And I think you have to smile when you look at the LLM hallucinations, because this is a big limitation in generative AI right now that keeps it from a lot of mainstream applications. There's lots of applications today that it's great at, but there are some, every now and then you don't want to have something that's completely crazy slip into the text or a negotiation or an interaction with a stakeholder that's just completely made up, and that's the challenge with systems like ChatGPT, that they'll just put in hallucinations that are impossible to explain. But I think overall, though, we're in a great spot, and particularly in procurement, because we do deal with lots of data, lots of numbers, things that a lot of the AI and machine learning techniques are quite good at. And for now, I wouldn't have an LLM negotiate with my most strategic suppliers and risk hallucination, but you can find lots of opportunities to deploy these that minimize the downside of the limitations and lean on the strengths. And that's really for I think as procurement professionals look at this technology, that's the question they should be asking, is how do I lean on the strengths, limit and minimize the limitations for now as the technology community solves these problems.
Right. I think that's a great point right there, and I mean we're gonna come back to that a little bit further on, right? So how do you prepare? But Neil's point is exactly correct, right? So and again, it is how it's being offered today, right? So if we're in AI version 1.0, right, we're starting with focusing on and leading with the strengths, and then as these limitations continue to advance and mature and build out, AI will have larger applicability to a broader scope of operations and activities. So Magnus, going to pull you back in and talk a little bit about intelligent procurement characteristics.
Yeah, so as Andrew mentioned here briefly at the start, the intelligent procurement is something that we at Ardent Partners have been talking about for a couple of years, and a couple of the characteristics that I want to bring up today in the context of AI here is around three main areas. So what we see as some of the defining characteristics here for intelligent procurement is one, it's data driven, right? So it's not sort of putting your finger up in the air and guessing that, yeah, this is the best we're going to do, or today feels like a good day to renew a contract or whatever, right? So you do it based on actual data to make sure that you make the best possible decisions and that you do them at the right time. Another characteristic is automated. So to really be intelligent here, we need to automate a lot of the basic, I'm not going to call them non-value adding tasks, because they are value adding for the organization, but they're not really strategic. And you need to use the skilled resources of your procurement organizations to focus on more strategic things that the technology can't do. So really leveraging that automation capabilities is one key of the intelligent procurement characteristics. The third one here that I want to bring up is collaboration or collaborative capabilities. So internal collaboration between stakeholders to make sure that you have all the background and the information you need, and then collaboration with suppliers to make sure that you get access to the best technology at the best possible value and so on. And AI is really a key enabler for all of this to get to the next level, so to speak.
Great.
And one point we need to make here as well is that AI, like the technologies that we've discussed here, machine learning, deep learning, and so on, natural language processing, they're not standalone solutions. And they, I mean, you could probably buy standalone solutions, but that won't really give you much value. So you should really focus on accessing AI within procurement solutions. So these solutions are purpose-built for procurement. So you get solutions that are trained for procurement use cases and trained on data that's specific for procurement and so on. And one big issue with AI is having access to the right data. So as an individual user, you're quite limited in the amount of data that you can use to train these models, while a solution provider has hopefully multiple customers, and they can aggregate and anonymize and use data from many other sources to train their models, and that how sort of get that scale that's needed. And obviously, working with the right solution providers, they combine the procurement and AI expertise. So going back to what Neil was saying earlier around, it's good to know the different definitions and the different types of technologies, but you won't really consume it that way. It's spot on, right? Because different technologies are good for different types of problems. Machine learning is efficient at classifying things like spend analysis, for example, where Gen AI and others are good at other things. But if you work with a solution provider, they will take care of applying the right technology because they have the right expertise for it.
Yeah. So Neil, I mean, you put your hand up. You said I really like this discussion. So yeah, comment here.
Yeah. So I think first, I think the title is perfect. Right? This is AI is not an island, just like procurement technology stack is not standalone. It has to be part of the overall enterprise. The data that's needed, the engagement that's needed is across a whole range of other systems, whether that's systems like ERP systems or where you source your bill of materials for your direct materials or forecast data. All this other data exists around, and all these other processes exist around, and anything that you're going to do with AI that's really interesting is going to have to be integrated into the overall landscape. And so that's, from an enterprise perspective, that's crucial. And I think you hit the nail on the head on this. As a solution provider, we train our models on a vast set of data that is beyond the reach of any individual customer. And so, the key on AI is these systems learn, and they learn from the data they see. And so if we can show it more data, if we can show it more experience, then they get smarter faster. And so you as individual customer get the benefit of the aggregate training data set, which is quite large. And again, more than an individual company could do on their own, but you get the benefit of the kind of intelligence that's built into the model because it's been trained. So I think this sums up. This is, to me, the exciting part, which is how to tap into all those other systems and interact with them to drive better outcomes in procurement. And it'll all be part of a grand dance or ballet, if you will, between the procurement tech stack and all the surrounding systems.
Yeah. I mean, it does make it, it's very helpful in a lot of ways, right, for the procurement organization. The folks listening in today, right? You don't have to design the models. You don't have to come up with the use cases. The challenge is, right, that there's still a bit of a wild west out there, and different solution providers are going to, leverage AI in unique and different ways, and that makes it very exciting because we're really still in the very early stages of this market developing, right? And over time there will be best practices and more broad-based alignment. But again, like to Neil's point, right? It's going to be sort of leveraging, the best ideas of the industry that are going to get carried forward into the solutions that you're using today or will be using tomorrow. And so, right, so we've talked a little bit about AI and procurement. We wanted to talk a little bit about the opportunities and challenges for AI and procurement. And so, Magnus was talking about, an intelligent procurement operation, right? And so, we've been writing about this at Ardent Partners for a very long time. It's our view that, the ability to make better informed decisions across an organization, is going to be game changing. And, that this new intelligence and these sort of marry in agility and, best practices, right? It's, these are going to be the fundamental drivers that push procurement and supply chain to the next level. And so the question was always, how does what's the bridge that's going to get procurement to that next level from a technology standpoint, right? There's lots of data being created today, and some organizations are starting to get their hands around it and thinking about, sort of reimagining and rethinking their approach to procurement. But AI is going to be the catalyst, right? And this opportunity is really now knocking at the door, right? It's still, sort of nascent in its impact from what it will eventually be. But this is really a call to action, right? The purpose of this is to get CPOs thinking about their organizations, their data, their technology, their infrastructure. We want to just talk about some of these larger opportunities so that you can begin to garner the resources and make those investments, right? I think Magnus sort of hit upon sort of these primary areas and primary ideas, right? AI can absolutely be a force multiplier, right? When you think about the challenges, particularly for CPOs that are living in major metropolitan areas of hiring and retaining staff, right? AI has the opportunity, and even in 2024, right, we're starting to see organizations leverage technology that have they're based in AI. They're beginning to shave a small part of the overall activity out of, taking it off of their plate, right? So from an automation standpoint, right, and that's where we're going to start to see, some of the initial sort of wins, right? These are the easier wins, right? To automate different areas, and we'll talk about some use cases in a minute. If you start to think about, sort of the power behind the technology, behind the capabilities and processing, more data from more sources, not just internal, but that would otherwise be possible with your systems today and with your staff today, and to begin to correlate different activities and events and behaviors from the past so that you can be better prepared for facing the next quarter, the next year, the next 5 years, right? That's where the AI opportunity really becomes extraordinarily powerful. And then again, back towards the collaborative thing aspect that Magnus was talking about, right? Being able to provide information in context, right? So for those of you listening in today, right, you're the experts of your procurement systems that you have within your organizations, but you're servicing, thousands of users who interact with these solutions on a fairly infrequent basis, right? Providing that information to those users in the context of what it is, who they are, and the goals and results that they're trying to achieve is really going to be a major driver of value for all procurement organizations, right? At the same time, right, just looking at AI and how it drives and expands automation, right? There's any number of use case examples that we could talk about, right? We could talk about autonomous sourcing, right? So Magnus, Magnus, let me pull you in, right? You came from an autonomous sourcing background. Talk a little bit about the opportunity there, just real quick.
Yeah, I mean, this is about automating parts of the sourcing, both the sourcing process. So there's a lot of different takes on autonomous sourcing, and it's sort of split up in different areas. But basically, it's either about automating the creation and the launching of the automation or the sourcing project. There are examples of autonomous negotiation capabilities out there, and so on. So it's streamlining the sourcing process, especially for sort of lower value, more repetitive types of buys. So it's combining RPA capabilities with AI, machine learning, those types of capabilities to really drive more efficiency in the sourcing process and enabling sourcing organizations to source more spend and increase competition in cases where you might before have been limited to basically go out to your incumbent supplier and renegotiate. Now you can quickly launch a quick sourcing project, get a couple of prices in, and drive better competition.
Right. And then you can look at supplier communications and negotiations and how those can be automated and triggered based upon historical information and based upon thousands or millions of different transactions and negotiations. One that I think people can get their hands around is contract summation, right? To upload an executed supplier contract into the system and have the system process the multiple page document and come out with a desired sort of header level summary with sort of key information, pricing information, contract duration, things of that nature, key SLAs, that can, still has to be validated, right? Still needs to ensure that has been done correctly, but that can save, significant time if your role is sort of managing organizational contracts. Neil, you guys have developed, any number of use cases, and I know you're going to do a case study a little bit later, but how do you think about this?
Yeah, so I think this is, I think a very good summation. Our Arkestro started roughly on the first bullet by trying to rethink the quoting process by using machine learning in that process. And as Magnus said, it's not so much around. I think we drive. I know we drive better outcomes and we save customers tons of money. But the real interesting thing is that it saves them time, and it allows procurement professionals and our customers to do more because the system does a lot of what used to be the grunt work. The back and forth supplier negotiation is done by essentially a machine learning algorithm instead of a human being, which just frees up humans to do more strategic work. And so it's essentially becomes this wonderful force multiplier, right? And as well, because of the scale of how AI works, you can change the nature of some of these events. And it used to be the case that if you added suppliers to an event, you essentially scaled the work associated with that event linearly, right? But with an AI-driven event, that's not the case. And so you can have a larger event with more line items, with more supplier participation, more competition, without necessarily adding burden to the procurement staff. And again, you're driving a better outcome, and you're freeing up the human, if you will, to do the more strategic work by allowing an algorithm, a machine learning model to do the autonomous back and forth with suppliers, managing the process. So again, there's lots of opportunities here, and the exciting part is, from Arkestro, from others, they're starting to get real world validation. Like, this stuff works. We're not yet at how for procurement, but we're definitely a force multiplier.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. And then they're sort of looking at, on the data side, right? It's the brute force capability to, navigate, millions and millions of transactions or communications, and to pull in all types of third-party data and begin to correlate that information to think about, your results today. And we're going to talk about predictive in a second, but it's almost like, if you were to log in, new employee logs in and gets to their dashboard, based upon who they are, the part of the organization, the categories that they manage, if that's their role. It's having a dynamic dashboard that just sort of gives them the spend information that they need, that elevates or rises up, the key activities and things that they need to do, based upon, sort of the vast reaching scope of the systems, and putting all of that information in context, and allowing that person to, make decisions, or to be guided to make decisions, based upon, a broad range of inputs that wouldn't otherwise be possible, right? And we really, again, it gets down to, we've been talking about, becoming a more data-driven organization, right? And the examples I've frequently used, right, is sort of the Moneyball for procurement concept, right? Where professional sports years ago, right, baseball and basketball, and really now all of them have, through their use of sort of analyzing data, changed the way that they play the game and have gotten better results. And it's always been our premise that procurement over the next decade is going to go through this similar transformation, and that the best practices of the early aughts are going to be very different than what we're doing in 2030. So it's really an exciting time. Neil, I mean, you were, we worked together a long time ago at the big player in this space, and 25 years later, we're getting there.
Yeah, it's I think it's exciting. The great thing about that first generation of procurement tools was that workflows are great at throwing off lots of data. And so, that first generation of procurement platforms generated lots and lots of data, but there weren't the tools and the infrastructure to analyze all that and to make better decisions. And that's what's really coming together now. And that, again, that's, to me, that's the exciting part. If I look at the previous slide, and we talked about how we're saving procurement professionals time by taking things off their to-do list because algorithms can do them. And here, now we're saying, now use data to put some strategic tasks back on the to-do list by looking at trends, looking at massive amounts of data, looking at commodity data or transaction data or trend data, and saying, oh, now that you have some time, look over here because we've seen this opportunity or that opportunity. And so this is the balance of, we save you time on the one hand, and then we show you interesting things to do with that time, strategic things to do, because you can look at massive amounts of data in a very, very short amount of time. And then when you walk in the morning, wouldn't it be great if your procurement assistant had teed up, these are the 5 things you need to worry about this morning based on the trends, the demand signals, the overnight markets, etc. It's an exciting future.
Yeah, and based upon the company's earnings from yesterday and the CFO's pronouncement and this team staff meeting, right? It's going to be able to do all of those components. And again, it sounds otherworldly, and I know that there are people that are listening in that still have poor visibility into their spend, and this this world seems very, very distant. The reality is that you need to start thinking about getting your data houses in order, and Magnus is going to walk you through some of those steps. But in the same realm of managing data, right, we look at predictive modeling, and AI's capabilities here really are a key component of its support for decision-making processes, right? So through advanced machine learning algorithms and statistical techniques, AI can analyze historical data to identify patterns, trends, and relationships that can then be used to make predictions about future outcomes. And just as an example, something that that I did before I became an analyst, right? We looked at and tracked spend for a group of restaurant cooperatives, and just tried to slowly over time, we were doing regression analysis. We were able to identify that there was seasonality in a few of the products that they bought that was not understood by the buying organization, right? And it's an example that through the analysis of data, you may be able to better understand and predict when your key suppliers have more capacity or less capacity, and to make your ordering decisions based upon that, right? I mean, there's so many different potential examples here, right? You can look at risk. You can be in the process, right? And as Neil talked about, here's your 5 activities for today. After I take this step, well, there may be some new information created because of that step, and it may drive you to, down a different path. Supplier performance, right? And not simply correlated to, the D&B reports that sit, unevaluated in, everybody's folders. And then larger market predictions, right? And again, a lot of these technologies, these predictive technologies are being built and developed in, like in the stock market, right? And these things are going to, continue to cascade over into the enterprise world. I mean, Neil, PPO has predictive in the name. Tell us a little bit about that and how you guys think about predictive modeling.
Yeah, so I think for us, this is the kind of reason to exist, is to help people look forward, not so much look back, but look forward. So again, we've started very, very early in our corporate life, making predictions on suggested price, right? What price should you pay for a particular thing that you're trying to buy in a quoting process? And that was the very first prediction we made, was the price prediction. And I think, kind of it all builds on this notion of, we want to tell you what we think is useful about the future, so that you can make better decisions, so you can understand them better. And I think this list is a really interesting one. The next best actions, which have been routine in the sales and marketing space for a decade now, are just now going to start showing up in procurement. Again, this notion of for Arkestro, it's like, what should you go to market in? What should you go back in and re-quote, because the market conditions have changed. And so this would be a good time to resource this product or that product. Like this notion of going through everything, the 30,000 different line items you might buy in a given year, and saying, okay, these are the 10 that have the biggest economic impact. We predict this will save you 10%, 5%, hugely impactful. Risk will be the same way. I think a lot of our audience probably watched the news of the tragic container ship hitting the bridge in Baltimore. And
My hometown.
And wouldn't it have been nice to be able to predict in that moment all of your supply chain risks and understand exactly what the implications of that were? So like these are answers that you need, and other market spaces like sales, like marketing, have deployed this technology. Again, exciting to see this now coming into the procurement and supply chain space.
Right, and what gets really interesting is when they start to find correlations between things that you wouldn't otherwise expect, and it changes the behavior, it changes the resources, it changes the skills that your organization is going to need, right? So I'll just go through this one real quick, right? So AI improves collaboration and the user experience. I mean, just think about guided buying. It really becomes guided everything, right? With your little assistants and chatbots to really help drive users of the technology, navigate more fluidly, and to make smarter decisions and to understand what they should be working on and having that prioritized for them. But again, it's this is still nascent, right? Early stages, right? The use cases, like when you think about the broad potential, and Magnus and I talked to all the different solution providers, and sort of the visions are grand and broad and vast. Where we are today is right. You're necessarily starting with the first initial steps, right? And so the use cases are targeted, still very valuable. Question though around data quality. It's something that all of you listening in, when you're talking to providers that are offering AI capabilities, is to understand what is the source of the data that is driving the decision making or just driving the activity. Who has the ownership of that information? Are there risks around access? Data quality for all, right? So you move to a data-driven environment, data quality becomes job one. And then another key point here, right, is because Magnus sort of described AI as the calculations and the work that's done is in a black box, right? And so anytime you're introducing a new technology, you want to make sure that there is governance and policies around what it is, how it is used, how it is checked and validated, right? I mean, Neil made the comment, right, that you're not necessarily going to go and use AI today to complete a full, multi-million-dollar cross-functional contract with a supplier independent of any human involvement, right? But even in the more basic realm, right, it's going to require, and this isn't something that procurement's going to need to do on its own, but the development of policies and procedures and how it's deployed, how it's used, how it's accessed, and who's doing so, and how decisions are made based upon the results. Neil?
Yeah, I think, on that last point, this is something that I'm sure the IT audience is keenly aware of, right? AI use is going to require governance. What data is going into models? What data is being retained? What data is coming out? Where are you applying it? What's the relative risk of using an AI in a particular business process? And these are all things you just have to consider when you're thinking through the deployment of one of these use cases. It's okay, the risk is relatively contained, the upside is great, we're going to go ahead and do it. But you have to be thoughtful in the process. I would say on data quality, this is an area that I think if I was going to prepare for the coming generation of AI tools, they're all going to come back, all the vendors are going to ultimately come back and say, better data means better model results. And so any investment you can make in getting your data house in order, I think pays dividends down the road, regardless of who you work with, where you get started. This is still a perennial issue that I think people should take the opportunity now and try to figure out, how do I start moving the needle little by little? It's a process. It's not a one and done to improve data quality.
Yeah, and there's a lot of wind, at the back of AI, right? The CPU power is increasing, the algorithms are improving, right? So like any technology, the cycle of innovation is going to continue to collapse, and so it's really going to happen at a very fast pace. I mean, Neil, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is the embodiment of Moore's law, right? It's going to data storage is basically, I mean, I'm sure my data team won't agree with me, but basic data storage is basically free, and compute cycles are fast approaching free, and even at the enormous scale that generative AI needs them, this whole problem set becomes more and more efficient. This is the great, Moore's law tailwind of this space, and which makes it kind of inevitable that this will be such a transformative technology.
Yeah, Absolutely, right. And so, we've talked about we've talked about what AI is. We've talked about, what it can and can't do and where it's going. Now I'm going to bring Magnus back in, talk about building organizational expertise, right? So how do you capture this great technology and leverage it to the hilt?
Yeah, I mean, for those that haven't gotten started yet, it's really is time to prepare to make sure that you lay the groundwork for integrating AI into your operations. So first step is always should be taken is to assess your readiness, or where are you now? How mature is your organization? Are you ready to sort of jump into AI, or are there perhaps more basic steps, if you want, that needs to be taken first? So making sure that you sort of know where you are on your journey. Now, AI can actually be used to sort of jumpstart some of these initiatives as well, but knowing where you start and where you are today is always critical if you want to go on a journey here. Right? So then also define the objectives and the priorities. What is it that you want to achieve? I mean, I've had some discussions with progressive procurement organizations that are sort of, we want to use AI, but you don't want to use AI for the sake of using AI, right? You want to achieve an objective. So what are your objectives, and how do you prioritize among those, and how can AI be used to sort of achieve those better? We've talked a lot about data quality here, so I'm not going to go into that. I mean, you can certainly leverage aggregate data that your solution provider has, but you also need to make sure that you capture your data in a structured way. And this is really related to building out the infrastructure to make sure that you digitalize a lot of the processes, because that's obviously the best way of capturing data, and especially data that is relevant for yourselves. If you have specific needs and specific processes and so on, the more of your own data you're going to have to be able to train these modules and go into the to the algorithms, the better. And yeah, establish your governance models and policies, and obviously this is goes beyond procurement, right? So what are your general AI policies in your companies, and how do they apply to your procurement processes?
All
right. So Neil, thoughts here?
Yeah, I think to me the second bullet is critical, which is you don't want to run a science project. You want to solve a problem. So define the objective. What do you want to fix in your organization? Where do you want to improve in your execution? And define the criteria, and then you can go into the market and find solution providers that solve that problem. Like an Arkestro, we solve some problems, not others. Find the one that works, test it, measure it, evaluate it in that context. And that's the essence of I think a successful pilot. But you have to start with what do you want to achieve, right? This is not about just testing technology. It's about solving a specific business problem in a measurable way.
That's great. So Magnus, talk about the team.
Yeah, and you then need to sort of focus on your team as well, right? So what do you have? What do people know about AI, and how proficient are they in this field? Because it's going to be pervasive in procurement moving forward. I mean, part of it will be delivered as a product. You still need the understanding here, so you need to focus on training. Make sure that people understand the fundamentals of it, because that's also a way for your procurement experts to understand what is possible, what is realistic, what are the use cases where we can actually leverage this. Then also rely on partnerships. So industry experts, solution providers, consultants, all of those types of resources that you have available, how can they help you on this journey? And thirdly here, obviously, talent acquisitions. Do you have the right talent profiles? Do you need to add roles to your organization? What do those profiles look like? When you rehire for existing positions, are there other skills that you should perhaps focus a bit more on now than you did before?
Great.
And then you need to sort of get on here and focus on developing your AI roadmap. So this sort of links back a bit to the preparation side, right? So again, as Neil also emphasized here, make sure that you identify and prioritize your use cases. Don't try to boil the ocean, as they say, right? Make sure that you line up what are the opportunities that we have, which one do we think we will get most value out of most quickly, and prioritize that way, or whatever prioritization mechanism you might have. You need to understand the available AI and how they're applicable to your situation and your context. You don't necessarily need to know exactly how it does, but you need to be sort of aware of the limitations, what is realistic, how much data does it realistically try to train these models to sort through some of the hype that is out there. Again, skills and training. You need to assess your current skill gaps. Do you have the right skills in your team? Can you train for it? Do you need to hire, or can you potentially partner for it? And you need to design those training and development plans moving forward with that in mind.
And so on CPO Rising, we're gonna take some of these slides, which could probably be their own webinar presentations, and sort of blow those out in a series of articles coming up. But as we look ahead, right, this is another one that's going to lead itself very well to an article on CPO Rising. What do you need to do to track procurement AI trends and innovation, right? It's market research, general monitoring. It is taking the partner model with the different solution providers. It's trying things out, right, with pilots. It's going to conferences, it's attending webinars like this one, and it's constantly looking to understand the trends, because AI, important to note, right, it's a moving target. Right, but what AI is going to do, it's going to free up resources, right? And that's one of the primary challenges today. Unemployment at historic levels for a couple of years now. That doesn't appear to change, at least in the Western world. Big data and predictive analytics, right? This is the big data opportunity that, I've probably mentioned big data on about half of the webinars over the past 5 or 6 years. This is it, it's here, it's knocking at the door. Absolutely fantastic capabilities that are emerging. This is something you've got to pay attention to, just like the internet, just like desktop publishing. Neil, you're gonna share with us a case study, I think.
Yeah, Andrew, do we have time? I'm just cognizant of the time, but happy to share.
Yeah, or if you'd like, yeah, it's up to you. I mean, we can do it for a minute or two, or if you want, you could send it out to everybody.
Sure. I think again, just be respectful of time. We'll include it in the materials and send it out.
Great. So appreciate that. So to just sort of close it out, right? So AI and procurement, right? It's overhyped, but it offers real value today, great potential tomorrow, right? So we, at Ardent, we've always said, let's be cautious. Let's not adopt the version 1.0, but the opportunities here are really compelling, and you need to dive in, right? The solution providers you're working with today are going to start to bring some capabilities to bear in the solutions you're using today. But it's no longer let's just look at the usual suspects. There's lots of new innovative companies that are making a big impact with their customers today, right? We've talked about the other sort of key elements here, right? How do you build? How do you partner? Getting your infrastructure in place, getting your data house in order, right? Because you're not only going to be leveraging third-party data, but your data is going to be critical to the decision-making process, probably more so than anything. And it's time to act and invest. And that doesn't necessarily mean buy technology tomorrow, but it's begin to invest resources in understanding this market, understanding the opportunities, so that when you do invest in technology, you're making the smart decisions. So we've got some contact information here. Let's see, we've got time for, let's take one question. I guess a question that we've got here from Don is, what are some good strategies to get better data quality? Neil or Magnus, one of you want to start?
I can jump in quickly. I mean, I touched upon it in on one of the slides here, but really, digitalization is one of the answers, right? So make sure that you capture the data, your transactional data, that you have contract digitalized so you can sort of access that data, and capture as much information as you can, because today you never really know what's going to be useful tomorrow as these solutions evolve. And the other part of the equation is obviously working with the right partners and make sure that they have good data that can be leveraged on your behalf as well.
Great. Neil, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say it's not a bad exercise to actually just step back and understand your data, right? To do that inventory of where's all your data, what format is it in, where is it digital, where does it need to be digital? This is just an assessment exercise I think would pay dividends to understand, okay, well, do we have 80% of it, 90% of it, 50% of it? So just to go through and map it all to understand everything from purchase requests to vendor quotes to receipts, payment, invoices, etc. Just make sure that that you understand it all and how it all relates to each other as a good first step.
That's outstanding. So Magnus, thanks for your time and collaboration. Neil, thanks for your great insights, and thank you to Arkestro, our sponsor. Watch for email with a link to the slides from Ardent, then watch for email and link to the recording from Arkestro. There are a few questions that we will follow up with you directly in the next 2 days. Again, thanks everybody for your time today, and hope to see you at the next webinar. Take care.